Ayn Rand admirers and students of her philosophy called Objectivism all know that Ayn Rand's ideas have been revolutionary in the field of politics, ethics, art, and epistemology, in other words, how we think. Recently I spoke with objectivist scientist on this show, Stephen Speicher, who introduced to the world for the first time Lewis Little's alternative to quantum mechanics and relativity, which we'll revisit again hopefully next week on the program. Once again, objectivism revolutionizing everything it touches. Ayn Rand's influence is universal. Her ideas have the Midas touch. Everything they touch turns to gold. Today, we look at the field of physical fitness. Yes, fitness science has been influenced by Ayn Rand's ideas. Of course, this hasn't happened by magic. It has taken real-life humans with dedication, inspiration, and understanding to make it happen. And one of these individuals to whom it happened is personal trainer and manager of Top Shape Fitness Solutions, Sean Bowring in Melbourne. Hi, Sean.
Yes, hi, Prodos. How are you?
Nice to have you on the show again.
Thank you very much.
And the other man who was influenced, Sean Bowring, and countless others, by his own living example and by his truly heavy-duty dedication to reason and rational thinking. Former Mr. Universe, former Mr. America, maverick fitness specialist, the muscle man of the mind, on live from California, I'm honoured to present to you now Mike Menzer. Mike, it's a great honour to have you on the show.
My pleasure.
Mike, I want to ask you first up, talk about idealism and hero worship, because one of the quotes that from one of your many superb essays begins like this: ever since I can remember, I've had a policy of always having someone to look up to. That to me is a wonderful statement. It indicates a certain benevolence and idealism in your character. Do you actively create yourself as a role model for others?
No, that is a consequence, not a primary in my philosophy. I don't think it was a primary with Ayn Rand either, as she wrote, at least on one occasion, that any benefit I may have for others is a logical consequence, or not a logical consequence, but a consequence of my writings, not a primary. My primary is enjoying the resourceful use of my mind, and that's the same for me.
Sean Bowring in Melbourne, did you notice what Mike Menzer just did then? He thought philosophically. He went to the hierarchy of knowledge and reframed my question in a way that only an Ayn Rand admirer could do.
Look, I think that's one of the best things about Mike, and he's not just his training philosophy, but also his philosophy and his sense of life, is that all of his thinking and his training ideas and he's just as I said, his aspects and his perspective on life is based on just that, on reasoned, rational thought, as opposed to cliches and catchphrases.
Prodos, Sean just brought up a very crucial element of the objectivist philosophy. In fact,
Mike.
my favorite concept, which is sense of life. Going back to your quoting me that I had a standing policy as a young man of always looking for someone to admire, to look up to. That was on the level of my sense of life, my preconceptual, emotionally integrated view of life, the childhood equivalent of a mature rational philosophy.
Yes.
It just so happened my father was a heroic figure, and through emotional associations, I came to admire and integrate people like my father, people who stood up for what they believed in.
Right.
And of tremendous integrity, and that's been my policy now explicitly, not on the level of emotional subconscious.
Yes.
But on the explicit level of a conscious, mature, rational philosophy. I am a hero seeker.
Right. Was your dad involved in fitness training and development?
Early on in his life, he was a karate instructor, played basketball, but never on a organized competitive level or professional level.
Right. Now, Sean Bowring in Melbourne, you discovered Ayn Rand through Mike Menzer.
Yes, that's right, Prodos.
Okay, so you're one of his many victims.
Well,
happy victims.
Exactly, that's right.
Mike Menzer, how did you discover Ayn Rand?
Very good question. I was a much younger man in my mid-20s. Back in the 1970s, I was in my literary period, reading the classics and just about anything I could get my hands on. And by chance, I came across Atlas Shrugged in 1977.
By chance?
Read,
by chance? I don't understand. How?
By chance.
How do you?
By chance.
How
Read it more or less as a literary duty. Enjoyed it, but was not overwhelmed by any of the philosophy.
Really? Wow.
Yes. And then in 1980, I met a very impressive man. In fact, the most impressive individual I've ever met. A man here in Los Angeles named Rex Dante.
Would you repeat that name for me, please?
Rex Dante.
Rex Dante. Okay, great.
Yes,
good name.
Fairly well known in certain circles here in Los Angeles.
Yes. As
a philosopher. And upon first meeting him, I recognized that he was the man of the highest mind I'd ever met. Very impressive.
Wow.
And I asked him how he got like that, and he said, Ayn Rand.
Yeah, right.
And I knew the name, and he suggested I pursue my readings of Ayn Rand, beginning with The Fountainhead, which I did read. In fact, that would have been my second book, of course, having read Atlas Shrugged prior.
Right.
And from there on, I went to her nonfiction works, including the Romantic Manifesto, which, interestingly enough, is my favorite of all her books, as I'm not truly an artist, and the Romantic Manifesto is her statement on art.
Yes.
The virtue of selfishness, capitalism, the unknown ideal, and many others.
Yes, right. Thank you, Mike. Sean, anything you want to say at this point, bouncing off what Mike just mentioned?
It's actually, I guess, as Rex was Mike's initial exposure to Ayn Rand's writings and so on. Most certainly, Mike was mine. Her name started to bob up in a lot of his writings in the general muscle media, and that certainly piqued my interest. So I started to then actively pursue her books, which weren't all that available through the normal booksellers here in Melbourne at that time, and I actually managed to find them through a number of second-hand outlets and so on, and started to grab them that way and read them. And
what was it about? I mean, obviously, if you were trying to find if you were trying to trace the ideas and the things that influenced Mike Menzer, you must have admired Mike Menzer. What is it about Mike that you admire most, Sean Bowring?
Yes, look, right back from the very early times when Mike was writing in the magazines, he brought very much an intellectual presence to his writings and to his persona as depicted in those magazines. Not just the physical impressiveness, but that intellectual presence, which was definitely lacking in most of the other high-profile guys around at the time, with the possible exception of someone like Frank Zane, although Frank's philosophies are probably 180 degrees the other way of Mike's, in that he's a very New Age sort of bloke, but sort of guy.
Yeah.
But so certainly it was definitely...
Mystic, in other words.
Very much so, yeah.
Mystic, did you say, Mike?
Yes, Frank Zane is definitely a mystic.
Yes, and I'd certainly concur with that.
Every top bodybuilding champion that I know is a thoroughgoing mystic.
Geez, that's extraordinary. Okay. Let me ask Mike Menzer a bit more on Ayn Rand's ideas. Without Ayn Rand's ideas, Mike, where would you be today in your projection?
I hate to even think of that.
Jeez, you wouldn't be a scrawny sort of 7-stone weakling or anything.
Yes, I probably still would have been a bodybuilding champion, but philosophically bereft, lost and confused, uncertain, a quivering, quaking neurotic like the vast majority of non-objectivists have to be. It's in the nature of things. If you don't embrace a rational philosophy, by definition, you're irrational, therefore uncertain, confused, neurotic, what have you.
That's pretty clear. Okay, so God bless Ayn Rand. All right.
Yes, I feel very fortunate to have lived in the time of Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
And I've thought about that many times,
Yeah.
to be a bit more serious.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'd be without objectivism. Exactly. I was always intellectually oriented, but there are a lot of people out there posing as intellectuals who don't impress me at all. In fact, many intellectuals claim the title based on an anti-intellectual approach to the intellect, believe it or not.
Mike, I remember some of your early writings where you mentioned, and this is prior to you becoming exposed to Ayn Rand's writings and so on, that you would get very, very fired up for your high-intensity workouts with the writings of people like Nietzsche and the music of Wagner and so on. Is that correct?
Yes, Nietzsche was the only other philosopher who stimulated me, and it was because of his sense of life. He had a marvelous feeling about the greatness of man, which he groped to express explicitly, but never at the same high level that Ayn Rand was able to achieve.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that question, Sean. Yeah.
As soon as I began reading Ayn Rand seriously after my meeting with Rex Dante, it didn't take long before I recognized quite clearly that she was beyond the pale, well beyond the pale, an epical genius, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. Ayn Rand set out to project an image of the ideal man. Mike, is your goal to create an ideal physique along those sorts of lines? Is that the idea of bodybuilding and fitness training?
Yes, it's interesting. Bodybuilders are romantic idealists, but they suffer the mind-body dichotomy.
Right.
They're almost their sole interest is the body. They pay lip service to the intellect, like most other mystics and irrationalists.
Yes.
But there's no bodybuilding champion aside from myself who takes the intellect as seriously as an objectivist would.
Right. Right. I would think, Mike, that you have spawned quite a few pro-intellect bodybuilders now. Would that be so?
Yes.
Is there a new generation of bodybuilders?
In fact, very good point. Prodos, it's interesting. As gratifying as it is to receive emails, phone calls, letters every day from bodybuilders around the globe thanking me for helping enlighten them with regards to a valid scientific approach to training, much more gratifying is the overwhelming response that I've had the last several years from bodybuilders thanking me for introducing them to Ayn Rand, Objectivism, and the realm of the intellect.
Wow. I got to say, Mike, just hearing you speak in these clear terms and with such conviction, I'm getting inspired and turned on here. I mean, obviously, you've got a contagious enthusiasm. All right.
Well, yes, that's good.
Okay.
Well, that's Mike's ability to inspire your level of motivation you may bring to the field of endeavour too, which is one of his prime qualities. Certainly when in my meetings with him, that's one of the factors that came through quite clear, was the fact that he was able to. Mike's a very intense guy, and personality-wise too, which is a real bonus, because it really does serve to fire those flames of your own motivation extremely well.
Yeah, yeah. Sean Bowring, last time we spoke, we looked at some of the irrationalities in fitness training. One of them was that the more is better myth.
Yes.
I want to ask Mike Menzer, how has bad philosophy caused bad fitness science? Can you give us a couple of examples, Mike?
Well, the examples are omniprevalent. You walk into any gym in any city, in any country of the world, and you'll see an untold amount of energy being wasted. If you could take all that energy from around the world that's wasted in fitness gyms, my goodness, you could create a new universe. And it all derives from the unchecked and challenged premise that more is better, which is fallacious. If that was the one true guiding principle, everybody in bodybuilding fitness would succeed, because there's a built-in guarantee, you see. More is better, Prodos, means literally that. More is better means more is better. You can't fail.
Gotcha.
If 2 hours of training is good, i.e. yields satisfactory results, then 4 hours is going to yield that much better results.
Right.
And as everyone in the fitness bodybuilding field knows, on some level of awareness, that simply does not work.
Right.
So can you imagine the whole field of exercise science would be based on the simplistic, childlike notion more is better?
Well,
my goodness, no science is that simplistic.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. There's a similar misconception in the advertising world. There's an idea that, or amongst commentators on advertising, that advertising is what sells products. Because if that was true, then companies should spend more and more money on advertising, regardless of their product. So there's a similar kind of problem there, isn't there? The more is better argument doesn't work.
No. As I say jokingly at my seminars, the more is better principle only applies to money and pretty girls.
And both Prodos and I support that stance.
Oh, absolutely. I'll tell Mandy you said that, Sean.
Thanks.
Is the more is better? Is that the main fallacy deriving from bad philosophy, or are there other ones as well, Mike?
Well, that's the central tenet directing the training of most people, and then there are a lot of tangential or derivative points which are wrong also. If your base, as you know as an objectivist, if your foundation is wrong, the derivatives, the rest won't hold up either.
Yeah.
Almost everything a bodybuilder does, from the moment he walks into the gym to the moment he leaves, is literally wrong.
Is that right?
It's interesting too, Mike, that point of yours that the mistake that more is better as being an underlying philosophy of training for so many people for so long now is they've taken that to the other extent and thought, well, let's go the other way and say less is better. But your point instead that precise is best is extremely valid too.
Yeah.
Well, I made that mistake for several years myself.
Right.
Yes, Prodos, he's bringing up an interesting point.
Yes.
The vast majority still believe the erroneous notion that more is better with regards to bodybuilding fitness training, which again is wrong.
Yes.
Many have mistakenly taken my stance to be that less is better.
Oh, jeez.
That's wrong also.
Right. How frustrating.
Yes. I operated on that notion as a trainer for several years, and my clients weren't making the progress that I knew deep down was possible.
Yeah.
When you have a valid theory, and you're making the proper practical application of the theoretical principles, progress, no matter what the field, including bodybuilding, should be nothing less than spectacular all the time. And I had to admit, during the early years of my training people, that my clients' progress was not always continuous and worthwhile.
Yes.
Therefore, there had to be a flaw in the theory of high-intensity training as proffered by one Arthur Jones, the originator of the theory. And after years of research and thought, I realized that the problem had to do with the idea that less is better. Right. Now I've come to understand that not more is better, not less is better, but precise is best, just like in medicine.
Yes.
There's something in medicine called the narrow-therapeutic window you may be familiar with.
No, don't know it.
There's a certain amount of medication you take, a narrow-therapeutic window, and you'll cure the disease, cure the symptoms. Anything beyond the narrow-therapeutic window and you go into the negative, you overdose.
Gotcha, yeah.
In fact, I make the point in my book, Heavy Duty 2, Mind and Body, that exercise science, and this is the first time this has ever been expressed, I make the point that exercise science should be properly viewed as flowing from medical science, where in both cases we're looking to effect a positive physical change.
Right, interesting.
In medicine, the first thing the researchers had to do was identify the chemical compound that would serve as the medicine to induce the positive physical change. The next logical step, inevitable step, was to discover how much of the medication in terms of volume, how many pills a day, and frequency, how often. Same thing with exercise science, again, too, where we're looking to induce or create a positive physical change. The first thing I had to do was discover the nature of the training stress that would induce the positive physical change, and it just so happens to be a high-intensity stress.
But how did you work that out, Mike? I mean, you're not a doctor, you're not a scientist. What was it that led you to that?
Ivory tower intellectuals don't have a stranglehold on the intellect.
Obviously not.
It's interesting, someone said in the Muscle magazine years ago, putting down Ayn Rand, he said, well, Ayn Rand was no Plato, implying that because she was not an historical figure or a PhD, that she couldn't qualify as a legitimate philosopher. Aristotle didn't have a PhD either.
I don't think Plato had one, actually.
No, there was no such thing as a PhD back then. You don't have to be a PhD to be a good thinker. Arthur Jones, a brilliant genius who's discovered or made invention areas as diverse as optics, animal science, bodybuilding, exercise science, avionics, quit school in 9th grade.
Right.
Went on to become a genius.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Now, Sean Bowring in Melbourne, I suppose with your clients, you adapt your training to suit their needs. I'll ask Mike the same sort of question in a moment, but I'm just thinking about what is a good looking body. Could I ask Sean first up on that one? What do you consider? How do you judge what is a good looking or a good body?
It's a very subjective one. Because everyone has
No, I don't think it's... Hold on a second, Sean.
Yep.
Whoop, here we go.
Okay.
That's it, Sean. Your history, mate.
Okay, I'm going there. I probably should qualify that remark. Let me think.
You think about it. Mike will tell us about
Okay.
it.
Well, you have to understand that bodybuilding, while not technically an art, has certain elements of art involved in it, and there are objective standards. This has been a bone of contention with me for a long time. It's been said quite frequently through the years that bodybuilding is very subjective, therefore you can't pick the ideal physique. There are aesthetic standards that guide the judgment of a physique. But to go less technical, I would admire anyone who was able to alter the appearance of his body through rigorous dieting and training over a period of time, such that he developed not necessarily the muscularly developed physique of a Mr. Olympia, but developed some muscle mass, dropped his lean mass to his body fat levels, to a point where he showed considerable definition, we call it, where there's little subcutaneous fat and the muscles show through in bold relief.
Right.
Beyond that, we'd have to go technical into bodybuilding standards, and that's beyond the scope of this, I think.
Right, okay. Yeah, sure, so there definitely are a few objective standards. I think, Sean, you were really pointing out that there's some area of optionality depending on your goals. That's what you were trying to say, wasn't it?
I agree with Mike's point.
As
soon as he brought the word subjective, it kind of raised the hairs on my neck.
Sean, you've got to be very careful here.
I most certainly do, and that's fine. I'll take that on board.
I suppose now Mike does make a good point because, of course, the way we use...
Remember, this is objectivism, not subjectivism.
Thanks, Mike. I think Sean is properly chastised there.
Yeah. The main point is anything that exists in reality, Sean, can be studied, identified objectively.
Yeah, look, point taken, and I agree with that. What I was getting at, though, was that each client has their own perception of what is a good body and where they want to go with in realising those particular goals and ambitions they have from talking with me.
Yes, there is an area of the optional, that's true.
Yes,
Ayn Rand.
and that was the point I was making. Probably subjective was a poor choice of words there.
Sorry, I jumped on you so quick.
No, you did the right thing, Mike. It's important that we use words precisely, and I think the word subjectivism is used in a very ambiguous way, and it creates package deals, doesn't it? It doesn't differentiate between optional and subjective. In other words, non-objective. So I think it's a good pick up there, Mike. Did you want to say anything else there, Sean, before we move on?
No, look, just the fact that people come to me with different goals and different ambitions as far as their training goes, but that doesn't preclude that there are very, very fundamental principles of proper and productive exercise science which apply to everyone, and so they're the basic principles that I use with my clients.
Yeah.
And some of those are obviously, whereas the principles are the same, the fine-tuning, the application, the derivatives of those are individualised based on that person's gender, their background, their lifestyle, their age. All those sorts of things too.
Sure.
I have to applaud. Prodos, I have to applaud Sean on obviously what has been very extensive study. He's making a distinction between fundamental principles and derivatives.
Yes.
Something very few people are aware of, and a very important point in the realm of the intellect.
Right. Yes.
Anyone who wants to go on and learn how to think critically at a very high level has to understand the difference between fundamental principles and derivatives.
Thank you for that, Mike. Funnily enough, one of the things I was wondering how to put to you, Mike, was what's the point of being muscular? And funnily, I just kept having this. I had a kind of Arnold Schwarzenegger picture in my mind of muscular, and even though I visited your website and seen pictures of you, I didn't quite register the shape that you've achieved in your own body. And this morning, I took another look, and I thought, my goodness, this is a very different shape from the Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of meathead shape. It's actually quite a beautiful. It's quite an aesthetic-looking body. Could you say something, Mike, about what is the point of being muscular in the way that you achieve?
Well, speaking for myself, the point was always competition.
Right.
I had tried a number of other sports and gravitated to bodybuilding. Now, of course, in there's a whole lot of underlying ideas. I like the idea of being muscular because for me it represented masculinity, power, certainty. I have learned since that muscles do not, once having developed muscles, you're not conferred a halo or certainty or even confidence. I know many top bodybuilders who are profoundly lacking in self-esteem,
Yes.
self-confidence, certainty.
Right.
But again, that's another area of ideas. I like the idea of masculinity, basically, the idea of looking powerful.
Right.
And I went into bodybuilding because I didn't like team sports. I liked the singularity of it. I was all by myself in the gym,
Yes.
had my own goals, was able to direct my own efforts, all by myself, and I am very selfish.
Right. Right. That's
Which,
great.
of course, objectivists know is a virtue, and I'm still working on becoming more selfish.
It's quite a challenge, isn't it? I've always said that the hard thing in life, it's easy to be selfless. It's very hard to be selfish, to work out.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Many non-objectivist listeners won't understand that, having uncritically accepted the notion that selfishness is evil, when in fact selfishness is the highest virtue you can achieve, and it's all but non-existent in today's selfless world.
Yeah.
Selflessness is what is evil. It's interesting how often you hear people bandy about the term self-esteem. How can you have self-esteem without being selfish?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Selfish merely means concern with your own issues and values.
Yes. Yes. Sure.
What's wrong with being concerned with your own values?
Oh, that's what you should be. That's what counts. Everything else, you can't. You're nothing without that, of course.
Well, if you
Sure.
don't give due priority to yourself, how can you do justice to everything else that's important in life?
Yeah, there's nothing left after that if you don't look after yourself, of course.
Very
Yeah.
good point.
Yeah. In Melbourne, Sean Bowring, personal fitness trainer and manager of Top Shape Fitness Solutions. And in the USA, the amazing, spectacular Ayn Rand admirer, bodybuilder, the muscle man of the mind, Mike Menzer. Gentlemen, we've covered a lot of ground already, and there's so much we can talk about. Mike, you wrote in one of your essays, bodybuilders, this is just a sort of a grab from one of the essays, bodybuilders all over the world complaining of the utter lack of meaningful progress, chronic fatigue, mind-numbing confusion, and gut-searing frustration. What that reminds me of? That reminds me of Immanuel Kant's pain, fear, and guilt. I just wonder whether, in fact, it's only the result of accepting an ethics of sacrifice that bodybuilders and fitness enthusiasts put up with so much pain and frustration. Maybe they think it's a virtue.
Yes, there should be no equivocation. Everything anyone does flows from an idea he has in his mind, and every idea he has in his mind comes from some theory, whether he knows its source or not.
Yes.
And we do live in a Kantian universe where self-sacrifice is held up as an ideal.
Yes.
It amazes me, Prodos, how many bodybuilders around the world are willing to waste hundreds, even thousands of hours with little or no meaningful progress.
Not to mention all that money, the amount of money that they spend on it.
Yes, it's a perfect example of self-sacrifice.
Yeah, yeah. I want to ask both gentlemen, man to man. Sean, in Melbourne, do girls find you attractive?
Well, that's a leading question. I guess it's
And I mean, is your work in keeping yourself fit? Does that contribute to your appeal to the opposite sex?
I think that certainly is the case. I think that if someone is in good shape and does look well, does look healthy, then certainly they're going to be a whole lot more aesthetically attractive too.
Yeah, because you have a questionnaire that you ask people about their motivation to get fit, and we spoke about this last time, Sean Bowring. In fact, appeal to the opposite sex rates higher than fear of death.
Looking good and appealing to the opposite sex do rate much higher than I guess, more important health issues. So there's a real issue of aesthetics coming through there, perceived aesthetics, as well, more so than the health issues or the mortality issues. That's right.
Mike, would you like to comment on that?
I find it difficult to believe that fear of rejection by women rates higher on the fear scale than fear of death, but...
Believe it, it's true.
Yeah, look, a couple of times, Mike, I've done some seminars and just put some questions to people and then and actually listed the responses, and in almost all cases, in the overwhelming majority of cases, people's wish to look better, to be more attractive to the opposite sex and so on, rate more highly than critical health and mortality issues.
I suppose it means it's more at the forefront of their mind. It's more motivating to them.
Yeah, and
it's always kind of in the back of your mind.
Yeah. You try to put it as far back as possible, the idea of dying.
Yeah, that's right. And bearing in mind too that the audience that I was addressing are people who haven't had a particular health scare at all at this stage of the game. They're simply not in the best of shape and want to do something about it.
Yeah. Mike, anything further you want to add to that?
Well, as people grow older, as I have,
yes,
I'm a little bit beyond middle age. Not fear of death, but concern with longevity, health, and the prospects of death become more central in one's thinking.
Yeah. I want to mention, dear listeners, that if you're as impressed as I am by Mike Menzer and what he's got to say and who he is, you can visit the Mike Menzer Heavy Duty website. I'll have a link on the Prodos Connection website, of course, especially internet listeners who are listening to this show will be able to find that as you're listening. But I'll give it to you now for listeners in Melbourne, www.Mike Menzer. Now, I'll spell Mike Menzer for you so you're clear. MikeMenzer.com, and I'll repeat that address later on. It's worth a visit. Not only is there a picture of Mike Menzer at his glorious best, but there's a whole lot of essays on fitness, on philosophy, on fallacies, on principles. It's a wonderful site. You could spend hours and hours on that one, and it's regularly updated as well. The internet's quite a powerful medium, isn't it, Mike?
Yes, it is.
I mean, are you grateful for something like the internet? It's allowed you to reach people that you wouldn't have otherwise reached?
Yes, it's quite gratifying. As I said before, I'm receiving more email from readers of my website who appreciate the philosophical content more than the fitness, bodybuilding, nutritional aspects.
Yeah. Are you rich, Mike?
I do quite well for myself, but
but there's room for improvement. Never well enough. Okay. Are you a millionaire?
No.
You're not a millionaire? Would you like to be?
Yes, very much so. I'd like to be a billionaire. But interestingly enough, it's an interesting point. I've chosen the hardest path in this field.
Yeah.
If I wanted to, I could have been a millionaire by now easily if I wanted to sell nutritional supplements, but selling radical new ideas is extremely difficult.
Right.
I make by what most standards would be considered an excellent living.
Yes.
But I've got a lot of bills.
Well, just on that point, or just an extension of that point, you've often referred to concrete-bound and self-arrested mentalities in the fields of both exercise science and bodybuilding. And you once again have quite a high profile, both in the sport and in the fitness area. Has that made it easier to get your message across to a responsive audience, or is there still a considerable resistance from high-volume or traditionalists?
No, again, it's been very gratifying. I reach an audience of close to 1 million people a month through my writings in magazines and my website. Possibly more. I may be actually read more than Dr. Peacock. I'm not sure about that. But the bodybuilding magazines are read worldwide.
That's great.
I receive letters from as far away as Serbia, Russia, South Africa, all over the world, literally.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm reaching a very large audience, Sean.
Which is going to be very gratifying to you to get that message across.
Because one of my goals is to have an effect on helping save the world, or at least redirect it onto a more rational course.
Yeah, great. Yep. Have you ever thought of doing movies, Mike? Like your friend Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Yes, he's not my friend. He's a thoroughgoing subjectivist.
Really? Oh, it's a shame. I like his movies actually, but yeah. Would you like?
No, I don't care. I don't care for the man. But that's a different issue.
Right.
No, I never took seriously the idea of being an actor. It does not appeal to me.
Right. Well, what about the Schwarzenegger type of body? What does that tell you about his approach?
That Arnold had tremendous genetics.
Right.
That I have seen individuals, Prodos, who never lifted weights, who I thought did lift weights. In fact, when I was in the Air Force, I came across two individuals who I was sure were advanced bodybuilders, and when I ask them how they train, they say, my goodness, I get that question all the time, I don't lift weights.
Right.
The point being is that genetics is a prime determinant
Yes.
in as to how much muscle someone can ultimately develop.
Yes.
Arnold did not pursue a rational training program. He was guided by the principle more is better. Got as far as he did because of, again, genetics primarily and the ingestion of steroids.
Right. Mike, do you have any special projects or crusades at the moment that you're currently involved in? Any particular direction that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I recently finished a book that is not geared to the bodybuilding, the hardcore bodybuilding builder per se, but the general public here in America. I've got a partner who's a marketing genius who at present is doing test surveys, marketing surveys before we launch the book.
Yes.
That's my one creative goal at the moment.
What is the book
Otherwise,
about, Mike?
I'm taking care of my website, writing articles, doing my mail order, and I'm an international phone consultant, which keeps me on the phone a lot of the time.
Right. What is the book about, Mike?
In fact, it's entitled The Ideal Exercise Program.
Ah, great.
Prodos, I am absolutely convinced for many reasons that high-intensity weight resistance exercise is truly the ideal exercise program, not aerobics, which has been proven not to even achieve the cardiovascular goals that were thought for decades.
Wow.
In fact, it can be quite dangerous as aerobics grossly overtrains certain few muscles to the exclusion of working other muscles at all, thereby creating imbalances in the skeletal muscular system, which makes one prone to injury.
Right.
In fact, I've made it a point, I've been in gyms all over the world. The vast majority of aerobic obsessives, as I call them, do not look very fit. They look flabby, in fact.
Right.
I think, Mike, I take your point. I think you are totally correct too. Just going down to one of our major jogging tracks here of an evening and seeing the people running around that, pounding the pavement, looking fairly pained and suffering, the percentage of decent bodies there is absolutely minimal. And more than likely, those people who do have good bodies and they are running and doing a lot of other productive things as well to have that appearance.
Gentlemen, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you, Sean Bowring in Melbourne, for joining us.
Thanks, Prodos.
And I've been on radio now for nearly 4 years promoting objectivism and good ideas, Mike, and I have to say that this has been one of my favourite interviews of all time. It's been a great honour having you on the show.
Well, thank you very much, Prodos. I enjoyed it. Maybe we can do it again.
I would love that. Thank you very much, Mike Menzer in California.
Enjoyed talking with you too, Mike.
And Sean Bowring in Melbourne.